Could the euro dollar crash? Hi, it's Charlie giving you Saturday's video. I hope you're very well. So, bit dramatic a title, isn't it? But let's have a look here. There is a growing consensus. I've got a chart of the euro dollar up here. There's a growing consensus that the euro could end up back down at parity at 1 to the dollar again. So the last time the euro was down at parity, if I come out to a weekly chart here, was back in late 2022. So if we come back, we'll come back to the technicals in a moment, but so the growing narrative is that you've got a eurozone which is struggling as far as economically and politically, in fact, whereby there's a lot of uncertainty there. France this past week, there's a lot of uncertainty there as far as they've just had to, Michel Barnier's just had to resign as Prime Minister, so they've now got to get a new Prime Minister, and politically, Macron is saying he's going to stay until 2027. So there's a lot of politics going on there in France. You've got a staggering manufacturing industry in Germany, Europe's largest economy, so they're struggling a lot there as well. So economically, not all countries, but some of the biggest, like Germany and France, are struggling to find their way at the moment, and it could get worse with Trump coming into power in January. Does he slap tariffs onto Europe? We don't know. He may not. He's threatened that, but whether he does or not, we'll have to see. But these are potentials. And so we're talking about, could the euro crash? So, and when I say crash, I mean fall here against the dollar further than it already has, because it's already had a strong run down since it making those highs it was only 2 months ago, in the end of September, it was sitting at 112 to the dollar, and it's fallen to what, 103.5 just a couple of weeks ago. So, but anyway, the story is, if those tariffs are applied, that could hurt the eurozone even more, and therefore we could see the ECB. Certainly, we're already looking at the ECB having to cut interest rates further than that of the US. And an economy which continues to underperform relative to, it's always about relative performance against the US in this instance, because we're looking at the euro against the dollar especially. So there's plenty of macro stories there which don't favour the euro right now against the dollar. And the euro, as I'm recording this on non-farm payrolls day, December, the euro's sitting, it's come up through 106 earlier. It's just sitting around that, or either side of that level at the moment. But what it's doing right now is not the point. The point is, could it come down? Could it have a bit of a crash? And could it work its way down to parity? So we have to come back to some of those higher time frames. So if we go back to the weekly chart, to put this into perspective, the euro dollar had, since those lows of 2022, has had a pretty good run actually. It had a great run off the back of those lows, and then although it's made new highs here in July of last year, and then came up again just into August and September of this year, up into that 112 zone. Ultimately, it's failed and it's rolled over technically and taken out the last technical higher lows, and most importantly, that low of October of last year, which was the lowest retracement point in this entire trading period. So from a technical perspective, the euro's taken that out when it came lower just a couple of weeks ago. Now, although it's bounced off of that, of course, we have to expect bounces to come in, and the euro may actually retrace and bounce further yet in the weeks ahead. We're into December. There could be more chop. Doesn't matter if it's down on the day here today or whatever it's doing as I'm recording this on the daily chart. Doesn't really matter. We could see some continued retracement here of that move that we've had to the downside. But nevertheless, we have had a technical break to the downside. So we have to assume, until proven otherwise, that even if we get retracements further up, and there's plenty of arguments for some more retracement yet, that ultimately the downside is the direction of travel now. Now we have taken these out, and therefore if we do roll back over to that 103.5 zone where it came down just a couple of weeks ago, well, where does it go beyond that? Well, there's always going to be other levels. There's support areas around 102, but there'll be even more talk of the potential for the euro to come back down to parity here, and so I think that's the potential story. There is a run back to parity, not this side of Christmas. I'm talking about into 2025. That is it's going to be a growing potential story there. What would give the euro some relief? Well, some form of peace negotiation with Ukraine and Russia would certainly help the euro surge higher. It would probably create a really strong bounce in the euro dollar. Is that going to materially change the eurozone and economically? No, not really. But I think that from a sentiment perspective, that would certainly help the euro go higher. But those are all other things that could happen, and there are other things that could happen on the US side of the equation. Maybe a slight deterioration in the US economy and in relative terms, and that could help the euro go higher. But whatever way we slice it, at the moment, from a technical perspective, we've had a technical breakdown of the higher lows that the euro's been putting in since making that low in 2022. We've broken down below all of those. So the assumption at this stage, unless this is some sort of just a fake move here, the assumption has to be that any retracements, any bounces that we get are going to end up being sold into, and we could retrace for several weeks. Trump's not coming into power until 20th of January. But anyway, we could chop around for several weeks. I've seen this before. There was a time here in late 2021 where it just chopped for several weeks before them resuming its run to the downside. It was actually almost 3 months actually. So I'm certainly well aware of that, but at this stage we have to make an assumption that until proven otherwise, and the euro, the direction of travel is now firmly to the downside. And then you just start looking down towards technical levels where it may next find some support or a bounce from, but parity becomes a much more engaging argument as we go forwards. Of course, there are always, as I've already said, things that could emerge that could turn things back around again, but for now, from a technical perspective and even from a macroeconomic perspective, the euro had its chance earlier in this year or into the summer of breaking out to the upside. It failed there, and we've got a failure now in the background. We've now taken out new lows, so the path of least resistance, until proven otherwise, is to the downside. What would prove otherwise? Probably be getting closer back towards this key 110 zone. So all the time the euro's pretty much below that zone there, 109, 110. Then one would have to assume the overall trend is still intact. This trend from the last 8-10 weeks, and that we will continue to make new lows. Hopefully that's useful. By all means, add something if you want to in the comments here today. Have a lovely weekend.